Welcome back to A Story to Tell from the campus of Dixie State University. We have with us today Congressman Chris Stewart. Congressman, how are you?
It's good to be with you. Thank you.
You had a rough day today.
It's been a busy day, but that's kind of the typical day for us. After a while, I get tired of hearing the sound of my own voice. I'm like, how do you people want to hear anymore? But it's been a fun day, actually. And anytime we're in St. George, we're having a good day.
Well, we'd like to have you come down and visit us.
Yeah, we love it down here.
Is this your favorite spot in the world?
Pretty much. It actually is. I tell my wife all the time. I was talking to a group earlier today, and I said, when we retire, we got to go down to St. George. It's just become just so dear to me.
Well, I interviewed Mayor MacArthur, the former mayor here, a couple of years ago, and of course he tells everybody this: you either live in St. George or you're going to.
Yeah, that's right. Let's hope not everyone decides they're going to, right?
Well, it almost seems like they are.
Well, it's good to see the economy and the city growing again. I mean, we had some rough years there for a while, and we certainly bounced back from that. And it's fun to drive around the county and see all these new developments and new homes and new people moving in, and it's exciting to see the growth. But we don't want to be turned into LA either, right? So.
I was in LA once a long time ago when it was a nice little city.
Yeah.
The same with Las Vegas and Salt Lake City, and it's just they grow out of hand. Is there any way to move some of that growth from there down to the middle of Utah?
Well, if we could create jobs in the middle of Utah, that'd be great, wouldn't it?
It would be fantastic.
And it's one of the challenges we have in the district that I represent. The rural parts of the district there, where you used to have families that could, graze cows and have cattle ranch, guys who worked in the coal mines, timber. And a lot of those jobs are gone now, and so with the federal government controlling so much of that land, it's been really hard on families.
Is there any hope to get that changed?
Yeah, I actually think there is. This is one of the reasons we're working so hard on it. If I thought it was hopeless, I wouldn't spend so much time on it. I don't think we're going to fix it by the weekend, but I think we can.
Monday will be okay.
Okay, give me till Tuesday.
Okay, Tuesday.
But no, I think we can fix that, and it's going to take a lot of work. We got to educate our fellow Republicans, by the way. A lot of times I've heard, Republican members in the Congress from the South or from the East, and they just don't understand it. I remember talking with a good friend of mine and saying, I have a county in my district that's 97% controlled by the federal government. And he says, come on, what is it really? And I said, really, it's 97% controlled. So we have to kind of help our friends understand the challenge we have. But no, I do think there's a chance for us to change that.
What about this new national monument they're thinking about?
Well, I think it's a real mistake. I really do.
Is that in your district?
It's not. It's in Rob Bishop's district and in Jason Chaffetz's. But we've worked with them, obviously, and the state of Utah and the delegation isn't so big that we don't help each other and work together on things. And I have to give Chairman Bishop a lot of credit, because he did what many of us hoped that process would be like. He brought all the stakeholders together, whether they were environmental groups or people who like to fish, or people who like to ride off-road vehicles, ranchers, energy interests. He brought them all together, and he spent more than 3 years now working on this agreement until they all felt like, hey, this is a compromise we can live with. But then you have President Obama back in Washington, D.C., who watches that and said, no, it's not good enough. I'm going to do it my way. And that's my fear, is that he disregards all of this work and all of this input from the people who will be most affected, which are the people who live in Utah. We're the ones who are going to pay the price of this decision. And he puts all that aside and says, I'm going to decide whether we'll make a 1.9 million acre national monument. I hope he doesn't do that. I hope he lets those of us who will be most impacted like it help have more input to that decision.
Well, some of the Native Americans are also against it, aren't they?
There are, and not all of them. They're kind of like Americans. They've got differences of opinions. Not all Utahns are for it or against it. The majority of Utahns oppose it. The polling on that is pretty clear. But there's a mix among the Native Americans, and some of the tribal leaders support it and some don't. Now it's worth pointing this out. Many of the tribal leaders that support it don't live in Utah. And I've talked with some of them. And you know why they support it? Because they're hoping that they create the monument in Utah, and that relieves the pressure so they don't create monuments in their states or in their counties. So, some of them are genuinely trying to protect the antiquities and things that are very important to them, but we want to protect those as well. But sometimes they're hoping that we take the brunt of it, and it relieves pressure on them.
What are some big issues in our district?
Oh my heavens, you know, the district is so big. For one thing, we go from Kaysville through downtown Salt Lake City and then west and all the way to St. George, and we go east all the way over to the river. And so you look at that district and you realize there's a lot of issues that matter. One of them is public lands, obviously, but that's not the only thing. A lot of them, it doesn't matter if you're from St. George or if you're from Salt Lake City, if you care about national security, and that's most people do. But you know, a lot of what people talk about now is the economy really going to be like this forever? Is this the best we can do? And I have to promise them and remind people we can do so much better than this. And Lane, let me illustrate that if I could. Under this president, we've had 0.44% economic growth every year on an average, 0.44. After
Now that's 0.4 of 1%.
Yeah, that's right.
Not even a percent.
Not even a percent. And under Ronald Reagan, for example, after the recession that he went through early in his presidency, we had growth of 6 and 7 and 8%. Our historical average is more than 2. And people say, well, Chris, what's the difference? 0.44, 2%, it doesn't sound like it's that much different. Well, this is what it means to a family. It means an average family makes $17,000 a year less now than they would have otherwise. It means we have 6 million more people living in poverty. It means we have 6.2 million people who don't have jobs. And again, Utahns look at that and go, we know we can do better at this. And frankly, Utah's leading the nation in economic growth. The rest of the country looks at Utah and says, how are they doing that? Well, it's because we have conservative leadership and we've got conservative values. We've got families. We've got the things that, you know, you build those institutions in society on. And too much of the rest of the country don't value those same things anymore.
Interesting. Minimum wage.
How much am I getting paid for this interview, by the way?
Minimum wage.
Am I getting minimum wage?
Minimum wage. Guaranteed minimum wage.
The thing about minimum wage is it hurts the poorest people. It hurts people who need jobs. And by the way, that's not me who's saying that. The Obama administration's own studies show that if you increase the minimum wage, like some have proposed, to $12 or $15 an hour, you decimate job creation in those communities. I'll give you one example. Seattle, very liberal, very progressive city, right? They increased their minimum wage to $15 an hour. Over the next 3 months, this was just a few years ago, this is the last 18 months. Over the next 3 months, Seattle lost more than 10,000 jobs. It was the largest loss of jobs that they've ever recorded. The communities around Seattle had an increase of 57,000 jobs. There's no question that those jobs moved out of Seattle and into the communities around them. So much so that even, as I said, even the president's own Federal Reserve Board in San Francisco, when they looked at California's idea to increase the minimum wage like Seattle had done, they said, don't do it. And even the very progressive Governor Brown said, this is a bad idea. It hurts the poorest people among us. We're not going to do it. Look, the answer to this isn't, you know, the choice is so clear. Here's one party that says, tell you what, we're going to increase your wage from $7 to $12 an hour. Show me any family that can raise a family off $12 an hour. You can't do it. All they're going to do is give them a little more money, but they're still going to be poor. The Republican answer is, you know what, take the minimum wage job, but then we're going to grow the economy. We're going to give you other opportunities. We're going to show you how to get a better job, and then we're going to help you get a better job. And after a while, you're not making $12 an hour, you're making $20 an hour, or you're making $30 an hour. Isn't that a better option? And that's really the two choices we have.
You're a Republican, so the next interview I've got to pay you twice the minimum wage. Right?
At least, yeah.
What about Obamacare?
Well, it's a disaster, isn't it? I mean, they just announced yesterday that average rate increases across the country, 25%. And by the way, that's after increases last year and increases the year before. And in some states, it's 50 and 60%.
I thought he said there'd be it would be a saving. Everybody would save money.
Everyone save money. You know the remarkable thing about that, Lane? Remember the very famous line where he said, if you want to keep your insurance, you can keep it. You want to keep your doctor, you can keep your doctor. And now we know from Professor Gruber, who was working with him because of his emails, as he's admitted, they knew at the time that wasn't true. And they got together and said, we have to tell the American people this, otherwise they won't let us go forward. They knew they were saying something that wasn't true. They also said it would decrease the cost. Well, that's clearly not happened. And that's depending on whether you buy insurance on the exchanges or whether you get them through your employer. It's gone up for everyone. I mean, I honestly don't know how anyone can stand up and defend Obamacare. And you want me to give you an example of that? When was the last time Hillary Clinton stood up in a campaign speech and talked about Obamacare? It's been months, and I really mean that. There's someone who actually tracks her, how often she says it. It's been months since she talked about Obamacare, because she knows it's a disaster too.
What's going to happen in the election?
Oh.
You don't have to answer that if you don't want to.
Well, I can tell you I won't be president of the United States. Other than that, I don't know, though. I mean, I really don't know. We're what, 2 weeks out now? A little less. And you know, the kind of the media story is that Hillary Clinton's got this one already. You know, she should go in there and start measuring the drapes and ordering the carpet. I think
bringing the furniture back?
You're bringing it back, that's right.
That was rude of me, wasn't it?
No, but it's true. They did take it from the White House. You know what else she did? And this was released in a previously classified report from the FBI last week. She took furniture from the State Department. She and her staff went around the State Department, took furniture and lamps and things and took it to her home. Oh my heavens, like they don't have enough money already. They gets paid $750,000 for a speech and she's got to steal government furniture for their house. But, you know, putting that aside, I mean, the media says that, you know, President or Secretary Clinton's going to be our new president. I don't know. I think there may be a surprise or two left out there. They said that Britain was going to stay in the EU too, didn't they? And we look at a number of primary states that we looked at last spring, and the polling turned out to be very, very wrong.
Interesting.
So you tell me what's going to happen in the presidential election.
Well, I'm not going to be the president either, so they're safe.
Well, we'll come back and talk about how we're glad we're not the next president, because the next president is going to have huge challenges.
They whoever it is, they will have.
Yep.
Marco Rubio, is he supporting Trump or?
Yeah, he is. And as you may remember, I was Marco's campaign co-chairman here in Utah, and we talk from time to time. He's in kind of a tight race there in Florida, as are a lot of Republican senators right now. And he has supported Trump. He's always said he's the Republican nominee. We need to support him. He's far better than Hillary Clinton. And he's expressed that pretty clearly.
Well, I wonder at people, of course it's none of my business, who make a pledge to support the nominee and then don't. Is there some moral justification for that, or?
Well, in certain circumstances there are. I mean, if there's new information that comes forward, I think people can, you know, sometimes find out something they didn't know before, and it can force them to change their mind. I mean, there's a difference between someone who says, you know, in a primary, will you support the eventual nominee? And they say yes. And then they end up not doing it just because they're angry that they didn't win. The American people don't respect that. They expect the person to adhere to their word and to support the nominee. But I think that's different than someone saying, yeah, I'll support the next nominee, but then they find out something, as in the case with Mr. Trump, for example, that they didn't know before, and it makes them rethink it. But you know, let me make this point as well, because like all Republicans, it doesn't matter what position you take on this, you're open to criticism. And I've been criticized by Democrats for supporting Mr. Trump, but I point out to them, and I think this is fair, you have to give the Republicans credit. Because we have had the courage and we've had the integrity to say, you know what, I think Mr. Trump is wrong on this, or I disagree with him on this. I wish he'd change his mind. I wish he'd listen to me on this. Show me any Democrat who has stood up and says, you know what, Hillary Clinton was wrong to keep classified emails on a private server in her basement. She was wrong to lie to the American people about that. It's wrong for her to go talk to banks and get hundreds of thousands of dollars to speak to a bank on Wall Street and then not tell us what she told them. I mean, there's a number of things that the Democrats worry about with Secretary Clinton, but none of them ever object. They just line up behind her and say, I'm going to support her regardless. The Republican Party has shown much more integrity on this than the Democratic Party has. We've been willing to be honest.
Are you supporting Trump?
You know what? I have a ballot on my desk. I look at it every morning when I leave, and I look at it every night when I go to bed, and I honestly haven't decided yet. I did support Mr. Trump. When Marco, you know, the guy that I was working for, when he wasn't the nominee, I said, Mr. Trump is our nominee. We need to unite to defeat Hillary Clinton. But some of the things he said last couple weeks have given me pause. And at the end of the day, I have to ask myself this question. If I was a private citizen, it's an easier question for me, I think. I can make a personal decision. But I'm in a position where I have more responsibility than that. And I have to ask myself, what is the right thing for America? And I can tell you this, I am 100% sure that Hillary Clinton and her presidency will be a disaster for us. And I know it can't be Hillary. So the question is there another choice or a better choice? And short of that, then yeah, I'm going to support Mr. Trump, but I'm still thinking about it.
Is there any chance that some other candidate can come in through the back door or something?
No chance at all. And that's been true for months now. There were lots of us who looked, last late spring, in April, May, and June, and said, is there another opportunity? But it was really obvious by the time we went to convention that Mr. Trump was our nominee and there wasn't going to be a change. And Evan McMullen, for example, I've known him for a couple of years. I like him a lot. I respect him. But in the time I've talked to him, I said, Evan, show me a way where you can deny both candidates the 270 electoral votes. And there just isn't. There just really isn't. So if that's being the case, this is a choice, as it's been for a long time. This is a choice between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump.
Well, that's my opinion also. And as bad as Donald Trump might seem or be, it would be 10 times worse to have Hillary Clinton in, I think.
Well, if for no other reason, and you know what I'm going to say, if for no other reason than the Supreme Court's. I mean, she'll have 3, potentially 4, in a nightmare scenario, 5 opportunities to appoint judges to the Supreme Court. And people say, well, those justices will sit on the Supreme Court for 30 years or 40 years. They'll change the court for 40 years. They change the court forever. Because once they sit on and they make those decisions and they set precedent, that precedent far outlives the Supreme Court justice who helped get that precedent established. It changes our courts forever. And that's the greatest fear that I have with Hillary Clinton, is what she might do with our Supreme Court nominees.
Is it going to affect the downstream people, congressional candidates and so forth?
We didn't see that for a long time, but we're starting to see it now. My good friend Joe Heck in Nevada, a solid conservative. He's a general in the National Guard, a doctor, a great candidate. We served together on the Intel committee. He's running to replace Harry Reid. And wouldn't it be fun to replace Harry Reid with a Republican? But he's been ahead in every poll, not by much, by 2 or 3%, really since last spring. But he's fallen behind now. Kelly Ayotte in New Hampshire has been neck and neck, and she's falling behind now. So I'm afraid we're starting to see it show up in some of the Senate races. Now, do I think they're going to lose? No, not at all. I think the polling could not be accurate because the polls will bounce around, especially when it's within the margin of error. And the second thing is we've still got 10 or 11 days in this race, and it's not over at all. I think both of those candidates are still going to win, but it's a lot harder for them now than it would have been otherwise.
What other domestic problems do we have?
Oh, nothing. We're good. No, my heavens. Well, the biggest thing like we talked about is just the economy can do so much better. And part of that is regulatory reform. I mean, I was a small business owner and you felt like the government was just standing.
I thought you were a farmer.
I did that too. Yeah, when I was very young.
Did you wear bib overalls?
I did. I wore bib overalls up through college, it seems like. But, as a businessman, I felt like the government was just sitting on your chest, just making it so difficult to do things. And we need to do regulatory reform. I mean, we need to just simplify the regulations. We need to do tax reform. We need to do entitlement reform. Social Security will be bankrupt in 2034. That's only 17 years away. Those issues are issues that we could fix if we had the right leadership, especially in the White House. If we had a president who'd work with those, we could fix every one of those things. And if we did, our economy explodes. We have so much economic growth. We give people the American dream again. Because a lot of the young people, we spent a lot of the morning at the university here, and we talk with young people, and you can see it in talking with them. They don't have the same degree of optimism that you and I had when we graduated from college. They don't feel like they have as much opportunity. But we could change that for them if we did some of these reforms that I talked about.
This is kind of maybe out of bounds or something, but, and I don't know how to say it. It's really serious and problematical. You're laughing.
I can't tell if you're being serious or if it's a setup.
I'm never serious. I interviewed Rand Paul, you know, when he was still one of the candidates up in Orem.
Yeah.
And at the time, there was a deal going around on the internet that Congress should be limited to 2 terms.
Yeah.
One in Congress and one in the penitentiary. And I said that to him, and he didn't even laugh. He just said, well, there's still some members of Congress that are honest.
Well, I don't know, because I sometimes feel like being in Congress is like being in the penitentiary. So can I serve my terms concurrently?
Concurrently. You're good. You have a legal mind concurrently.
Yeah.
You ever regret not being a lawyer?
No. I was a pilot.
You were a pilot.
That was a lot more fun.
Well, I used to fly airplanes, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Hour after hour of sheer boredom interrupted by moments of stark terror.
That's right. Yeah, but you live for those moments of terror, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Get the blood flowing. Well, what do you get the most flack on being a congressman?
You know, it's a frustration that people feel, the same frustration that I feel. You know, I come home and people say to me, you know, why aren't you doing this? How come you're not doing this? And a lot of times I say to them, you know, we have, the House Republicans have, in almost every one of the things that people are frustrated with, I can say, you know, the House has passed legislation that would fix that. But then it goes to that great graveyard of legislation known as the Senate, and it all dies there. And that's very frustrating, and it's frustrating for the American people. And I think if there would be one thing that I hear again and again, it's that. It's, why aren't you guys doing this? And then you explain that they are, and then they're frustrated that the system doesn't allow us to move that legislation and to allow it to die in the Senate. Or even if it gets through the Senate, will the president sign it? But you know what? At the end of the day, our founding fathers got it right. I mean, they didn't want the House to be able to create legislation by themselves. They said it had to be the House and Senate. The president had to sign it. Which is why it's so offensive to many of us when we see the president say, I don't care about Congress, I'll do it myself. I'll do it with executive orders. No, Mr. President, just like I can't create legislation by myself, you can't do it either. We're supposed to work together to fix these problems. I hope the next president doesn't do that. I'm afraid that Secretary Clinton will. She said that she will. But if she does, then we'll do everything we can to stop her, which, by the way, I was one of 13 Republicans who said, we're going to sue the president for his executive actions. And the courts found that we had standing, and we were able to stop him. For example, with his executive amnesty. We stopped him because we went to the courts and said, you don't have the authority to do that.
Should you have to present a valid picture ID to vote?
That seems reasonable, doesn't it? I mean, you have to be able to prove who you are. I don't know how you could object to that. And if you don't have a picture, how can it be an authentic piece of identification?
This is probably rude, but I saw on Facebook the other day a post about someone said, Grandma voted Republican until she died. After that, she voted Democratic. That was really rude. Don't tell anybody I said that.
All
okay?
right, no one's going to hear that. So.
Right. Anyway, we live in a wonderful world, actually. We've got a lot of problems, but we're probably in the best place we could be, and we just need to work hard to try to facilitate it even better.
Yeah.
What's your advice to the human race today?
Well, I don't know if I have any advice. I mean, who am I to give anyone advice? But I would maybe say this. I was in Philadelphia a few months ago, and we were out there with a group, and they were from all over the country, and we had a chance to spend a couple days together. And as we went through, you know, Freedom Hall, and you know, these icons of our heritage and our history. And it occurred to me that these things didn't happen overnight. The miracle of the Constitution didn't happen in one summer. The preparation for the Revolutionary War really started in about 1750s. And it took us 20 or 25 years to get to the point where we could actually make a difference there. And even after that, like I say, the Constitution, we tried some things, the Union of States, and it didn't work. We tried some other things and it didn't work until we finally said, let's write the Constitution. So I just think it was a reminder for me, and I would share that reminder that, you know, one election doesn't destroy nor save our country. One man doesn't destroy or save our country. It's a continuation of good people trying to do the right thing. And I think most Americans are still good people. I think most Americans want to preserve our freedoms. I think most Americans want to have a strong economy, a strong society. And I would just ask people to keep fighting for that. You know, don't get so discouraged they give up. It's way too early to give up on our country. There's still so many good days ahead of us. I really believe that.
You have an opponent, a Democratic opponent, in the general election. Have you talked with her, met with her, debated
Oh, yeah.
her?
Yeah, we've talked, you know, any number of times. We've seen each other at campaign events and debates and other things.
There's a rumor that she doesn't live in the district.
Well, that depends on how you define living in the district. And, you know, I think, you know, it's interesting that that's become something I'm asked about all the time, because as it turns out, most people in the district really do care about that. And I think what people feel like is, if you don't live in the district, how do you know what's important to us? And why are you saying that there's no one in our entire district, 750,000 people, and none of them could represent us? We have to go outside of the district to find someone? But, you know, she says she lives in the district, but here's the thing. She has this multi-million-dollar house in Park City. The week that she files to run in this district, she rents a 2-bedroom apartment in Salt Lake. And then she tells people, I live in Salt Lake. Well, you know, most people, when they hear that, they go, you know what, it sounds to me like you live in Park City. And you've lived in Park City for years. And you just came down here to run. And I think most people in the district are uncomfortable with that.
We must state that it's not a requirement to live in
No,
the
it's
district.
not. I've never argued it's a requirement. In fact, I've hardly said anything about it. What most people wonder is it a good idea?
Right. Well, I think it's a good idea. I think it should be a requirement.
To live in the district?
Right.
Well, I just think it's better if you know your friends and neighbors and you know what's important to the district.
Right. When you ran the first time, I think there were 3 or 4 people that were running that weren't living in the district.
Didn't live in the district, and you know what? I think that a lot of those folks would tell you that that's part of the reason they didn't win, is because, again, people in the district really appreciate having someone who represents them who lives in the district too.
Congressman Stewart, I
Chris.
can't get too personal. It's always a nice thing to talk with you, visit with you, whether it's on the air or not.
Well, I consider you a good friend. It's an honor to be with you.
Well, thank you very much. We've been talking with Chris Stewart, Congressman Stewart. Thanks for being with us on A Story to Tell from the campus of Dixie State University.